everybody. Before I get started, I really want to encourage you guys to use your minds and come along with me on this journey. Growing up, my father worked at The Ohio State University. One of his roles there was mentoring international students. He was helping them feel welcome, not just at the university, but in the United States. That meant that our home was a gathering place. So every month, we would have these international potluck dinners. I recall when I was about 5 years old, watching from the upstairs window and seeing all these people arrive in their traditional clothes, vibrant colors, and they were bringing dishes and stories from all around the world. Our home was full of food, it was full of laughter, and it was full of culture. My brothers and I would be called down to mingle and to taste and to learn. Outside in our backyard, there was this large table. And on that table, it was full of food. It was also full of stories. And it was full of people from all over the world. But as I got older, I realized not all stories were told so easy. Not every home has a place for that kind of sharing. And some stories, they were never invited to the table. But even in a house full of love and full of culture, we were not immune to hate. One day, a cross was burned in the front of our yard. I was about 5, months after that potluck dinner. I didn't fully understand what was happening, just that something was wrong. I remember the fear, I remember the confusion, and I remember the quiet. We were one of 2 black families living in an all-white neighborhood. My parents didn't say much that night. Days later, they explained what that symbol meant, the history behind it, and how it was used to terrorize black families. But what stayed with me wasn't just their explanation. It was their response. They didn't teach us to hate. They reminded us to stay proud of who we were. They promised us and told us to keep loving and keep leading with dignity. That was the first time I realized that not every story was told right away. Some stories were delayed, some stories were silent, and some were never told at all. That silence didn't stay in the dinner table. I started noticing it in classrooms. I started noticing it in textbooks, and even in my own family and other black families. I don't remember ever learning slavery in any real depth in my neighborhood school. Civil rights movement, maybe just a little bit of Martin Luther King Jr. in February. And I definitely do not remember celebrating Black history in our neighborhood school. But what I do remember is classmates asking me if I was related to Michael Jackson. They asked me to teach them the Michael Jackson dances. So at recess, I proudly taught them the Thriller dance in my red MJ leather coat that I know most of you had. I also had a classmate that came up to me and said, "Vanessa, do you ever take showers?" He said, "Because the brown is not coming off your skin." That's what fills the silence when we don't teach Black history. Curiosity without context and stereotypes instead of understanding. And for many Black families, that same silence creep into our homes. It wasn't neglect, it was protection. A way to shield children from pain they might not be ready to carry. But when do we stop protecting and we start preparing? While silence can protect, it can also leave gaps. And when those gaps involve our family and our cultural history, those costs become too high. That loss is even more painful because we didn't come from silence. In many West African cultures, we came from griots, storytellers who carried histories the entire community. Storytelling wasn't just tradition, it was power. It was identity. But after slavery, that tradition was broken. Not just interrupted, it was silenced. We went from telling stories with pride to whispering them to not telling them at all. I have 2 kids of my own now. And I know we can't only rely on family to pass down the truth about our history. We cannot rely only on schools. We cannot rely only on textbooks. It's going to take all of us. Parents, educators, artists, storytellers, and more. To make sure that the next generation has more than gaps and guesses. In my search for understanding what was missing and how to bring it to light, I came across this word, Sankofa. It's a word from the Akan tribe that means go back and get it. Not just a suggestion, but as a way of life. That journey then took me to my education. I studied sociology with a focus on race and ethnicity, and communication with focus on TV and film production at The Ohio State University. I also earned a master's degree in media management, and then later on, I got another bachelor's degree in ASL translation here at Columbia College. I spent years in the entertainment industry as a talent agent, learning how identity and stories are shaped, and what we see and what we don't. That calling then led me to my first documentary, Sankofa, Chicago, now on PBS. It is about understanding the importance of Black history, not just as a subject in school, but as a foundation for identity. That then led me to the sequel, Sankofa, Chicago, The Untold, where we reached out to over 400 Chicago public schools to learn what history and social science curricula were being used and what was missing. I also interviewed kids, and I asked them, what is race? Some of the young ones took off running around the chair. And to them, race was just a game, like something when a teacher says go. They did not connect identity or history or the world that's around them. And honestly, it's not their fault. That's on us. But after completing the documentary, what I found was surprising. While we're still not there yet, Chicago and Illinois are ahead of most cities and states. We were the first to mandate Asian American history. And thanks to State Representative LaShawn Ford, who's also in the doc, Black history beyond slavery is now required in high schools throughout Illinois. But the most powerful part of that journey came from the teachers who went beyond the textbook. A science teacher highlighted Black and Latino scientists. And an art teacher, she took her students to Pilsen and walked around Pilsen to learn Latinx culture. They weren't just teaching history. They were doing what Sankofa calls us to do. Go back and get what was lost. That spirit then led me to the third one, the Sankofa experiment. It's a social experiment we filmed with 6 families and different races and ethnicities, each spanning 2 to 3 generations. So we brought them around a table, kind of like the one from my childhood, but this time not with food, but with truth. We encouraged the kids to ask their parents and their grandparents, have they ever experienced racism or discrimination? What came back were stories that had never been spoken out loud. A white mother broke down when her son asked her about her parents and what her parents taught her about racism. She said she was raised to be racist, and that's why she no longer speaks to them. And she didn't want that for her kids. A Pakistani father shared how everything changed on September 12th in 2001, the day after 9/11. A Chinese American family talked about being mocked for their culture and the weight of the model minority myth. A Black grandmother spoke about marching with Dr. Martin Luther King, while her grandchildren, decades later, talked about being called the N-word at school, and then a 10-year-old boy just cried. A Latinx grandmother shared how when she goes into the grocery store, she's followed. And her daughter spoke about being stopped by police in a car for no reason. Their kids were shocked. They had no idea these things were happening in their own home. We also tried to reach out to a Native American family, but everyone we contacted declined. Not because of disinterest, but out of fear. Fear of being misrepresented, fear of re-traumatizing their children, and fear of speaking what speaking might cost them. And that silence says something too. Some stories go untold, but not because they don't matter, but because the weight of telling them has been carried alone for far too long. And now, when my husband and I sit at the table with our kids, I think about the stories we're passing down. Not just the joyful ones, but the ones that remind them of who they are, where they come from, and why their voice matters. For years, I believed that silence was protection. That's not saying that the hard things were a way of shielding the next generation. But I've learned that when we don't talk about racism, when we bury the pain and we erase history, the silence becomes part of the harm. I've sat across children who have been crying, not because of what they heard, but because of what had never been said. I've watched families turn towards each other for the first time, not to fix the past, but to finally speak it. We begin to unweave the silence around race, around identity, around what this country has taught us to hide. And in this place, we start to build something stronger, a fuller history, a deeper connection, a table that has room for every story. So I leave you with this. What stories in your family have gone untold? What truths about race, about culture, or belonging have kept quiet for too long? We cannot change what we don't name, and we can't heal what we don't speak. It's time to go back and get it. It's time for Sankofa. Thank you.